You know, credit where credit's due. The Keanu scowl is very faithful to the source material. John Wick Hex is a game from a few years back, which I totally ignored due to its critical reception, but it's surprisingly good. The John Wick films are one of precisely two franchises that I can quell my ADHD long enough to watch. I love these movies, and this game's concept is, I think, perfect for a John Wick game. You're playing as John, and your main resource is not guns, health, or rounds, it's time. This concept, I think, is the best way of handling a John Wick game. Though an FPS probably seems like an obvious choice, I don't actually think it would work very well without being incredibly generic. The plots of John Wick movies are basically an excuse for Keanu to murder a bunch of generic goons, so an FPS would really have to heavily rely on gameplay. A unique combination of ranged combat with scarce ammo and intense committal melee could be fun, but doing that in a tactics game is much easier. In a top-down strategy game with these mechanics, using melee in the middle of combat flows extremely well because it's so simple. Even if you're busy shooting people, you can switch to it in a second by just clicking a guy, you click takedown, and then you see Wick own zone some guy. In FPS, you need a whole load of mechanics to facilitate the exact same scenario, with melee attacks, parry mechanics, frame data, balancing those versus each other, making the controls not suck ass, etc. The player doesn't have to be super excellent, but thanks to how the mechanics flow, they feel like they are. Now this should be pretty obvious, but this game's art direction bangs so hard. This might be the best part of the game. It heavily utilizes a technique that the John Wick films mastered, rim lighting. Rim lights are a technique used in both art and cinema to highlight outlines by using colors of the environment around them. John Wick as a series used them in literally every shot, and the lighting goes crazy in all of the movies, but especially 2 and beyond. This game utilizes the same technique to make every single character immediately pop out because the lighting actively bounces off of them and looks so incredible. It seems like such a simple technique, and it is, frankly, but you'd be surprised how much the slight depth added by this lighting can add. It only ever appears on characters and not the environment, which helps differentiate them from the worlds they reside in, providing a gameplay benefit as well as looking nice visually. Now, let's talk about gameplay. A big part of the films is how Wick is deadly proficient with whatever the hell he can get his hands on. That spirit is definitely kept up here, with the average level including switching weapons about half a dozen times. There are 7 arcs, which are strings of levels which share a narrative connection and have their consequences carry into each other. The main consequence that carries between each level is health, and the way it's handled was done horribly. You start with 2 bandages in every arc, each refilling a health bar, effectively giving you 3 health bars to tank attacks with across all of the levels in the arc. Now, that probably sounds okay on paper, right? But in the first level, you can tank a firing squad, blow all of your healing, and then be left with nothing for the rest of the levels. Sure, you win, technically, but you might as well restart or you're in for a hell of a time. I think it's pretty bad design to incentivize the player to Obi-Wan Kenobi themselves after making some mistakes they know they could have avoided, especially when the solution to this problem seems pretty obvious to me. Obviously, this game is based on the John Wick films, and guess what he does all the time in those movies? He executes people while they're down. It's the whole reason that the first movie didn't end right here. Shooting someone takes an identical amount of time to just punching them when they're right next to you, so there's really no reason to do it despite how commonplace it is in the films. Shooting someone while they're down should probably replenish your health a tick or two, so you always have a way to get back in, and it fits with the Wick mythos. God, the Wick mythos, holy shit, I am such a pretentious bastard. The other main resource you're juggling during gameplay is Wick's focus, and I, honest to God, have no idea why this mechanic even exists. Actions that cost focus are parries, takedowns, and rolls, but they simultaneously cost way too little and are used too infrequently for the cost to ever come up. Getting focus back is an intense matter of waiting for Keanu to shudder in place for less time than it took me to utter this sentence. There are a grand total of about 3 enemy types: guy with gun, melee-based individual, and dude with large health bar. The melee lads have a bad case of The Last Jedi choreography, and will awkwardly stand around if John starts a melee attack on someone. There was a few times where this didn't happen and I died instantly instead, but I'm fairly certain they were bugs because this is the only time this ever occurred, and otherwise the mechanic was fully consistent and stupid. It makes extremely silly scenarios like this happen, where John is just wailing on guys for upwards of 20 seconds while they just watch. As for all the other enemy types, you deal with them all in the same way. Kinda fittingly, I suppose, if Wick gets his hands on you, you are just dead, with no way to fight back. If you shoot before them in the timeline, you might as well, but otherwise, breaking line of sight with terrain to get close and then skill issuing them with absolutely no counterplay via looping takedowns and melee attacks is the way to go. I'm not sure if this is intended to be as good as it is, because right now I'm going to show you the final boss. It's a really epic battle, prepare yourself. And then, after that, the game ends. A sequel to this game would go really hard, I think. An expansion to Wick's loadout is all I would really want. Melee weapons, both proper ones and improvised ones, for example, would fit both the series and gameplay really well. A huge part of the films is their commitment to realism, and the inclusion of aspects which might seem trivial to most action movie directors, like reloading. Reloading is a mechanic, but it is severely underused. I'm kind of astonished you can't take magazines out of guns to store on you and use later. I think a mechanic like that would have fit really well with the source material and slid into gameplay really smoothly. The only worry is that it might have made the game too easy, but I think there are probably better ways to handle that, like changing how the health and focus systems work. I suspect there may also be a case of cut content here, as this little bit of text in one of the tutorial pop-ups heavily implies that there's meant to be more than just one reloadable weapon in the entire game. I've played a lot of strategy games. It's a pretty inherent part of the genre that they're pretty taxing to play due to how much you have to focus to not eat shit and die. Hex is rather relaxing, however, as well as being fast-paced. There is an expedited mode where you only get 5 seconds per move, but this changes pretty much nothing, as at least I was making decisions in under that amount of time anyway. Even if you are indecisive, only a quarter of a second passes with every turn, so you have to leave your computer on for like a minute to ever receive any actual punishment. If this game came with like a random level generator, a handful more enemy types, less cheesable melee, and aforementioned reloading system, I think it'd be a banger for sure. I'm not saying it'd have like the replayability of chess, but it would absolutely be a good time waster. The version of the game we have left before us is rather buggy. I experienced multiple soft locks, bizarre reality-shattering bugs, questionable line of sight, and the AI having mental breakdowns quite often. It definitely feels like it was a polished pass or two from being finished, as kind of evidenced by the jankiness of the animations and the AI in general. Your tolerance to this kind of thing may vary, but it really didn't affect how I personally felt about the game, and I'm usually kind of a stickler for bugs like this. The pace of the game being pretty quick means that getting a level soft-locked really only loses a handful of minutes at most, and the game is fun enough at its baseline that I mostly just felt like, oh no, I will just have to play more of the game. It doesn't overstay its welcome either. Each arc will probably take you about 1 to 2 hours, and I found it to be a really good time. When levels are over, you can also get a lovingly janky replay, and while I'm not going to say that it looks good, it is charming, and some scenes do look good enough to make you feel like you just played some John Wick choreography. This game was a lovely little surprise, and I would genuinely highly recommend it to anyone who likes tactic games, which, statistically considering what games I cover, you probably do. Thanks to all my patrons, you're all quite wonderful people. Love you all, and good night.
I think I've got this round in the bag. I think I've lost this round.
It's time for the science experiment. Oh my Jesus fucking Christ.